the future of this work is low wage and precarious and toxic chemicals on the plant floor, then that will be the future of work for a lot more people than just auto workers.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
The biggest story, no doubt, is about the UAW and their their potential, and it's looking day by day more and more likely that it is going to be a strike. We're going to be reviewing after we let you go all of the some of the proposals that Shawn Fain went over last night. We just spoke to earlier in the program a UAW member, Nick Livick, about working for GM and what that's like and how the members are feeling. And so just to take kind of a 30,000 foot view of this, how have you been seeing this struggle play out, and what do you think are kind of the big things to pull out and emphasize?
Yeah, I mean, instead of going into the particular demands, I think the bigger thing, the sort of broader dynamics here, there's a couple important ones. I mean, one is this broader ongoing problem of offshoring. Stellantis is already threatening, has long been threatening to move jobs to Mexico, as they'll put it. And so there is, I think, a broader contradiction that we have to that the UAW, and particularly the newly elected reform leadership, still has to figure out of, how do you build international kind of solidarity among the unions to combat this employer threat to to engage in basically capital flight. That question is also front and center because of the way this fight is playing out around electric vehicles. So this is another thing that, it's interesting with the UAW and auto work, because you really see how powerful it is, how central it is for the economy. As soon as there's a threatened strike, you have Biden making comments, you have Trump sort of weighing in, you have, it's like front and center, right? Very similar to the UPS strike. This is a massive part of the economy that we sort of rely on these workers agreeing to work in these plants. And so I think it's really, it's a rare thing, similar to the rail strike that was not, in that when there's certain parts of the economy, when workers actually threaten to withdraw their labor, you see just how much leverage they have because people start freaking out. I would say, so the EV fight is another one. I'm sure Nick probably talked about this. But, basically, this is a huge sort of priority of, say, the Democratic Party, that they would sort of be seen as having figured out a way to push the transition to electric vehicles, which objectively is good. Yes, we want electric vehicles. But in practice, what's happening here is basically the build out of an entirely non-union, it's almost like a lower tier. But it really is the future of auto production in America. So the UAW rightly sees it as like watching all of its future, be dispersed and there is no future, right? Because this is where the money is going. And of course, there's like tax subsidies and incentives and loans to push this transition. And it's like you're just watching non-union, futures get built right in front of your eyes. And so this is a big part of the fight because the UAW knows that the legacy auto is going to be more legacy than ever. The EV stuff is going to be the future. So that's another big one.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Right, and that about the transition is really important, and just to emphasize, because obviously now we're in the online portion of the program, so most of the people who see this are going to be union people, left wing people, right? You're going to agree, but we do get a couple of people occasionally who will see our stuff online and kind of balk at it. It's not just because these non-union jobs are non-union. It's because, like you said, they are of lesser quality. They pay less, the conditions are worse, you have less time off, you have worse health care, you don't have a pension. I mean, you name a condition of your work and these non-union auto jobs are worse, like without a doubt. And so not only does it challenge the union's, place in society, it challenges working people's ability to have good and decent lives. And again, just as I try to point this out a lot, the question is not, is this value being created? Is the money being made? The question is, who's going to make it? And the UAW wants that question to be answered by the workers. The workers, they need to make the money. They need to be able to have a good standard of living. And the big three automakers want it answered the opposite way. They don't want the workers to have any money. And what Trump did in his trying to attack Shawn Fain last week, which was amazing, he tried to obfuscate that. It's like, no, it's not about the workers versus the big three. Actually, what it is the big three automakers that Shawn Fain has been attacking these last several months. They're actually in cahoots with Shawn Fain to create all these non-union jobs. And they're screwing you over like on purpose. And you shouldn't pay your dues. I mean, it's really astounding, kind of the gall to put forward that argument.
Yeah. I mean, it sucks, right? Like it makes no sense, of course, first of all, but to see, I mean, this is what I meant about, this is really, to go back to you saying, this is about whether people can have good paying, decent jobs. I mean, this is the standard that the UAW set with these national contracts way back in mid 20th century, right? These were decent jobs that actually set the standard for manufacturing work, not just in auto, but all across sort of industry here, because these contracts were kind of this pace setting function in America. And so they've been significantly undermined, of course, in recent decades. And then this question of will the future of these jobs just be entirely shitty, right? Like will you be getting paid $16 to work at an auto plant, $16 an hour, right. Which is what was happening at one of these plants. And so, I mean, there are bigger questions, and it's sort of why this becomes such a political fight, because auto has ripple effects. If you set a standard in this industry that is high, it will affect other industries and other workers as well. If you cannot do that, and the future of this work is low wage and precarious and toxic chemicals on the plant floor, then that will be the future of work for a lot more people than just auto workers.
Exactly.
I'd say a lot of it has to do with like our self-image, because we have this so American-made kind of thing and all these politicians want to ride on, American workers. But so it's big, and they want to jump in on it because it's part of our identity, and a lot of people's identities, these union workers, it's huge for them too.
Yeah.
And the transition to more green energy, quote unquote, it's even bigger than the auto stuff. There was a really fascinating report from the American Prospect a couple of weeks ago about Georgia really raking in the money from these green energy tax subsidies, being the number one recipient of money and jobs in the green sector, but it's all going non-union. All the construction is non-union. And, there again, not going with the building trades is really going to, it hurts Georgia construction workers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say other than I think one last thing to say is this might be a very difficult strike. I mean, maybe that's stating the obvious, but these companies are massively powerful. There is a brand new leadership. I mean, it's crazy to think about the reform slate, wins all the seats they contest. I was in Detroit the day after Shawn was sworn in as president, and he had to lead a special convention the next day. I mean, that in itself was sort of chaotic. Now they are trying to, institute, it's not just pull off a strike or lead a strike, but sort of there's a vision of like rank and file mobilization that, these reformers adhere to, about strike contract campaigns, about organizing at the shop floor level. And they have had, they're starting to run a contract campaign and stuff. But again, we're talking about they've had 6 months total in taking over from an incredibly entrenched and, sclerotic bureaucratic leadership that in fact did the opposite of encouraging workers to be able to sort of take their own initiative. The admin caucus that ran the UAW forever, sort of if sort of pulling off a rank and file led kind of mobilization is a muscle, it hasn't been worked in the UAW. Even when they do strike, which is, it's a very strike prone union for sure. There is a sort of legacy of militancy, but it's so top down. You're just told, hey, you're going to go out on the picket line tomorrow. And you're like, okay, you have no idea where the contract negotiations are. You're just like, okay. So, I mean, I just want to emphasize this is like a massive undertaking for people who are just getting their bearings on what it is to sort of rework and reform this union.
I actually remember
the most powerful companies,
Right. And I actually remember being struck by that in 2019 when I was on the picket line with GM folks, asking them, what are kind of the big things, and none of them could really tell me. They were like, like our leadership, they told us to go on strike, and so, obviously, we trust them, and so obviously the companies aren't, GM isn't giving us enough, and so we're fighting for, what we deserve and everything. And that's admirable that, they were willing to go on strike and not cross the picket line and give up pay and all that, because they had trust in their leadership. But you shouldn't really have to trust your leadership that much.
Yeah, I mean, Shawn Fain has said that maybe Nick or you guys have discussed this before. Like Shawn Fain was on the Stellantis National Bargaining Committee, a few years back, and he has said that even he was blocked out of knowing how negotiations were going. It was just the one leader, and no one else was allowed to know anything about how things were going.
Right.
And so I really, compared to, you mentioned Shawn Fain's being on Facebook Live yesterday giving updates. I mean, he's been giving updates constantly. It's just a wildly different approach. And that's, what you kind of need if you're asking your members to engage in what could be a lengthy strike or a difficult strike. People have to know where they're at. And feel oriented in the fight. And so I think that's a great thing. But whether they strike 1, 2, or 3, I think it looks like almost certainly come, next Friday,
right,
there'll be a strike.
Alex Press, staff writer for Jacobin magazine. Appreciate you taking the time with us this morning.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Have a good one.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project. And you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.